Hi, and welcome to another Legally Insane Films podcast. Today, I'm actually talking to the vice chair of the Libertarian Party, currently a candidate for governor in the state of Arizona, Barry Hess. You can find his information at hessforgovernor.com, and also you can search him out on Facebook. Barry, thanks so much for joining me today. And speaking of Facebook, you got kicked off recently. What's the story there?
Well, it was funny because it's an old, like from a year and a half ago, a message or a comment that I had made, and I was responding to someone in kind, and that was it. And apparently I violated community standards, and they don't read the previous comments or don't care because it's really a screaming liberal, one of those trolls. So another 30 days, yay!
Welcome to Facebook jail.
My record. You know, I've only in 10 years I've had 1 7-day, 1 30-day, well, and now 2 30 days.
Well, thanks so much for...
Facebook is just so old. It's so yesterday's news.
Well, I've got another question about Facebook, and I'll ask that in a little bit. But thanks for joining me today, and just wanted to show my appreciation for... I mean, it's kind of been a long time coming. I've wanted to talk to you for a while because you actually make an appearance in my movie, and wow, what an experience down there in Quartzsite. Do you recall that, right? I mean, that's pretty fresh on memory.
It definitely was, and yeah, thanks for throwing me in with my flag shirt on. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know I had worn that one.
Yeah, you had a couple of good shots there. You had an interview that made it out.
Yep.
You know, face-to-face interview with John Wright, who was down there documenting that, and you also made it on to stage, kind of celebrating the officers who revolted against
Absolutely.
the chief. Yeah.
Yeah, Gilbert was quite a character. I mean, it was so insane, and I think your documentary really pulled it out. I think you did a really great job in terms of letting people see all of the intricacies and the things that were going on backstage with Ed and Jenny and everybody. I mean, because we're all friends. And I was impressed with it. When I walked away, I had a good understanding of what was going on. I didn't know a lot of the background stuff that you introduced.
Well, thank you. How did your, how were you introduced to that scenario, and how did it play out that you came to be in Quartzsite?
Well, I happen to know the mayor, which was Ed Foster, and Jenny Jones, and a couple of the other people up there, and I had gone up to speak in reference to a campaign, I believe. And the next thing you know, Jordan Page and myself and Ernie Hancock and a lot of us gathered up to show that we do support the officers because they did the thing situation, and we're very grateful for that. And the way they were running Quartzsite, it was just a big cash flow for big individuals. And I really liked how you tied it up at the end and how things have been reformed. I thought that was actually a very good thing that you added.
Yeah, I wish I could have created more of a... So I gave some finality to the film because the version that you saw was actually the film festival version. And what I'm really hoping to do with the version that you saw is to have the assets bought by a distributor that really, that gets me the bigger story. I want to release this as a series, right? There are landmark lawsuits. Excuse me. The governor was, I'm not the governor, Ed Foster, as you mentioned. They refused to seat him on his second mayoral victory. And he had to sue up to the federal level. I mean, there's so many violations. There's so many individual arrests that I could not put into the feature that I there's no way to do the kind of true exposition of this story and do any justice whatsoever without putting that into a series. And I'm hoping to, in distribution, get it bought by someone who pays for those assets to be just expanded. I mean, that's what I really wanted to do. So it's interesting to me that you kind of said, there were some things that even you didn't know about, and you were there and I wasn't. I only got back to the States in 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
No, it was a big deal, and a lot of people showed up. It was great to see the outpouring of support for this little podunk town in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But it sits on a very active aquifer, and when they were talking about the water, that's what we were seeing. Because water is gold in a desert, and that's what this thing was all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't all the corruption was in the individuals, but what led the event into the next was the desire to control the water, or to have the people pay for water for a private company.
Right. Yeah, that played a big part as well. In that bigger version, I really want to get into how the water treatment plant came into the limelight, so to speak, in being. I'll go ahead and say an active role, or at least allegedly an active role in how that money got filtered.
Allocated.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, allocated is a good word. There was more than water flowing through that water treatment plant, if I can put it that way. And
Absolutely.
And
it was money laundered. They were washing money in that thing.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but not really, because they're drugs, people, children, all kinds of things flow through Quartzsite.
Right. Yeah, and in a very literal way, it's the major hub for travel, for it's a corridor for just moving everything you can imagine here and there.
Sure, and it's so far out. There's virtually no oversight other than the Quartzsite Police Department. And when they started calling in the state police, and I thought that was a good idea, and I'm glad they did.
Yeah. What did you think about in total? And I know that you're going to be coming at this from the libertarian perspective, where there's a serious need for a drop in government, but in some places, as we're seeing here, there's a little pockets of communities where they sit geographically in a very key location where at least more oversight needs to be in play. What's your perspective as a libertarian on that particular facet?
I don't know that we need more people for oversight. I think what we need is transparency, so that anyone in the public can go see. That would be better than having a few individuals. You get a few individuals to do oversight, and pretty soon somebody owns them. That's what happens with oversight committees. But if you leave it at a random situation where anybody can get in and get the information, it really lessens the prospect of people trying to cheat, and that's really what we're dealing with. We see it in the elections. We see it in this whole cootie bug scam and all that stuff. We are so misled by the media and by government officials. It's pathetic. I don't think this situation never would have happened in the 1950s. There would be tar and feathers, and you'd come running down the road, half these politicians.
Well, I don't know. Maybe in the every town, right? But I don't think Quartzsite was ever the every town. Quartzsite has always been this vagabond meeting place for underground trade and off the books exchanges. And, part of me is completely behind that. And the other part of me is like, well, that does attract a certain caliber of individual. And we saw that as the town government was populated with certain types of individuals. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, you see, from the libertarian perspective, and I am a libertarian, I want to see as little as possible. But really, the answer is not to add more government to try to suppress the bad things that are going on. It's to reassess the bad things and question whether they are bad things. For instance, I just saw that I believe it goes into effect tomorrow. Either Washington or Oregon has completely decriminalized all drugs, just like Uruguay, Paraguay, and 15 other countries who have seen extraordinary drops in drug use by legalizing it and making it more available. But what you also do is you get rid of a lot of the insidiousness of the cartels who are trying to control their territory. Well, if you open the territory up, there aren't any more cartels. And that's been proven time and time again. This whole drug war nonsense is just to keep the drug warriors wealthy.
Right.
That's what's going on here. It has nothing to do with drug use. And I get really pissed off because you smoke a joint, you go to jail. But that takes you, the breadwinner in most cases, out of your home. Now your family, 80% of the time, goes on welfare. So now the state gets to take care of them, gets to take care of you as you're incarcerated, and nothing is improved. Nothing.
Right.
Except that they've taken you out of the economy and they destroyed families. And I think that's at the root of what a lot of America's problems are, is the family has been disbanded. People have been convinced that the government owns their children and can shoot them up with all this nonsense, these drugs and experiments. And as a parent, I'll tell you what, there's a reason God made guns.
Well, you tapped into something there, and there's also, I believe, a mental health issue in America. It's rampant. I think that a lot of things are wrapped up in this. It's they package a gun issue and kind of send it out into Congress when really the heart of whatever issue they're talking about is really a mental health issue.
Right.
These things that happen, these travesties, horrible shootings that occur, and things like that. It's a mental health issue that we need to address. And tapping into what you were saying, you take the breadwinner out of the family, you put him in a house full of people with mental illness, and you teach this individual the dark way of living, and they come out scarred. They come out traumatized by what they're either witness to or victim of in a place where people, they don't discriminate. Once you're in an open community, I forget what they call it in jail, open grounds with people who are in there for murder. You're
hobnobbing with, you are what you are surrounded by.
Right.
Your friends. I mean, if you hang out with lowlifes, you're going to find out that you're doing low-life things even though you didn't even notice. If you're hanging out with a quality group of people, then you start doing quality things and you start noticing the lowlifes.
Right.
And say, well, why are you doing that? Is there no moral compass left in America?
Yeah. And smoking a joint is not something that makes you a lowlife. Smoking a joint, unfortunately, is just something that puts you in with lowlifes,
that is ridiculous. The whole notion of where they tried to portray it. But let me tell you, as I grew up, I was smoking pot with my law school professors, with my college professors, with my college colleagues, all the way through. And right now, I know judges, I know lawyers, I know politicians. All of them have always smoked pot. And yet, some of them have voted to keep it illegal. It sort of reminds me of the guy from California, one of the senators, who was totally against guns, and then they bust him for running guns. Generally, when politicians are against something, it means they're doing it. That's the problem. They want to see a monopoly on a situation, whether it's guns or drugs or whatever. And if they can get that through Congress, yay team, they win.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened.
Stop this.
That's what happened in Quartzsite. That's one of the things that I love about the story of Quartzsite, because it's under a microscope. These big, these are problems that you're kind of reserved for cities 100 times its size. So when they happen in a town of 3,500 year-round residents, it's under the microscope. You get to see how a council. And I won't reveal too much, and everything I say, by the way, is alleged until proven in the court of law, of course. But
get those legalities in there.
But if you follow the train of the film, there's a reason why they refuse to seat Ed Foster. There's a reason why they refuse to release FOIA requests and public records requests. There's a reason why they got kicked out of the insurance pool for lawsuits that they kept losing, right? And there's a reason why one of the major judges in the area wrote a letter to the FBI requesting oversight for a police chief that was allegedly, wink, wink, out of control, because the people that he sent into his court kept getting cases dismissed. Like everybody was reaching out for assistance. And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Like, why do you think nobody answered the call? They called everybody. They called the AG. They called senators. They went to libraries of Congress and pulled out the Arizona Constitution and went, ape shit on finding facts and details that were, as upheld in court, their stronghold. These people used the Constitution. They tried to reach out and use the channels that were supposed to be available to them. Why didn't it go anywhere until media, the major mainstream media, caught on to it? Why didn't anybody help these people?
Well, it's funny because I talked with a lot of the legislators about it, tried to get some action out of them, and while they were sympathetic and they knew it was true, things hadn't been proven at that time. But politicians are a bunch of pussies. As a general rule, they don't want to do or say anything that might offend or alienate any portion of a prospective voter. And they're so afraid of that there's sort of this quid pro quo that they'll just sort of let it go. It's the city's problem. Let them handle it. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones who were elected. And even though there's a question now about all the elections, but the reality is that I think the reason that politicians stayed away was the same reason they stayed away from Colorado City, if you remember that. But do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, actually. I've been under a rock for 2 years.
A reform community, northern Arizona, on the border, and completely run by Jeffs. His last name was Jeff. Got him.
Let me pause you for a second there, Barry. You're breaking up on me. Has something changed where you're at?
Not at all. Okay, I moved my microphone a little bit. Are we okay now?
Yep, much better. Go ahead.
Okay. But Warren Jeffs, that's who it was. They ran this community. Basically, he could come take your daughter as his wife anytime he wanted, and he could.
Oh, yes, I do know about this. Yeah, the LDS community up there.
Right, and he moved off to Texas, and that's ultimately where they grabbed him. But it was his brother took over. Well, no politician. Oh, incidentally, they would have 20 wives. All of the wives were individually on welfare. That was one of the big sticking points. They were draining welfare funds in the most inappropriate possible way.
Right.
And still living in, they were living in trailers and really kind of dodgy circumstances. But Warren lived in a beautiful place, and his favored people all had nice places. But nobody would go in there, and it was the same reason, because that was easily as corrupt as quartzite. Those are two things, and they're both in Arizona that's something you might want to look into, by the way, for a future documentary.
I think a doc has been made on that, actually. I think that HBO or Vice did one that kind of dives into it. I think it was a female producer or director, if I'm not mistaken. I'll look it up, and if you're interested, kind of come back at you on that one. But I've heard that's about lots of Arizona towns. There's a town right down the road from Quartzsite called Brenda that everybody was like, you think you have trouble here? You should go check that out. And this is a town of like 500 people, right?
Yeah.
I
grew up in a town of 700 people, and in New Hampshire, and I have to say, these kinds of power pushes, I never saw any of, and I knew everybody, literally everybody in town, and all of the people on very personal levels.
Right.
I didn't see it there. That Yankee attitude, sure, I'll help you if you need help. That was it, and nobody seemed to be in it for themselves to the point where they would sacrifice anyone else. Well, out here, we're talking Wild West, and everybody's fodder when somebody wants some money.
Right.
And we've seen it with pipelines. We've seen it with gas lines coming up from Tucson. I remember that one. I think it was Kerr Morgan. And it's just, Arizona has grown up with corruption, and it seems for many politicians that's all they've ever seen. So to them, from their perspective, that's how it works.
Right.
But that's not how it's supposed to work.
Right.
That's why I've always said, hey, if you want to get an honest government, you go through the phone book, although we don't use phone books anymore, and you run your finger down and you just pick one. That's going to be one representative, and that would be, just totally random. And the reason it would be a much better government would be because those people could come in without the guidance of their predecessors to lead them astray, and all they'd have would be the Constitution, which is their job description, to tell them how to act. That's all. And I think that would actually be an enormously good thing, and the people of this country would freak out when we don't have any taxes, at least no income, personal income, or property taxes, which is my goal as governor. I want to eliminate them, and I'm talking all personal income and property taxes, federal and state, because they're simply theft. You can't justify theft without their consent. People don't like to get up off their, and it's hurting people, because imagine if people could keep another 30% of paycheck. Do you think that would help their family life at all? Maybe take a little pressure off?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think... go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
I was going to say, it's up to people like you who take the initiative and you highlight things, and then you go do the deep dig and find out what's behind all of this. I think that's essential. That is part of what media is supposed to be. But I just watched an interview with, do you know who Carrie Lake is?
No.
Carrie Lake she's a Republican running for governor. She is a former newscaster, very well respected from Fox. She quit Fox after 35 years, a couple of months ago, I guess. She quit because she couldn't take it anymore. She said, I'm not gonna keep lying to the people. And she called it out. She I have to say, I appreciate it. She's a little. I'm looking forward to competing with her because she is somebody who's at least a decent person.
Right. That's kind of it seems like it might be a win-win.
Oh yeah. I think it is. And whereas obviously I'm not going to support her for governor, but she's going to be probably the most worthwhile competitor that I can imagine.
Right. Well, and you tapped into an idea of journalism that, a little background on me. My dad was a photojournalist in the Navy, right? Back when you could, I won't go on that stream, but my dad raised me with journalistic integrity. My second undergraduate was in journalism, and when I got it, it was from old school rag guys, old school newspaper guys. One, the chair had his doctorate, but nobody else had their doctorate. They were just old school rag guys, and that's who I learned from. I learned from my dad, essentially, in professor form. And when I left college. Let me pause for a second. Before I even left college, I was doing internships all over the world, South America, Central America. When I went on into my career, I was working for rags overseas, the Taipei Times, the Bangkok Post, the Tico and Nika Times in Costa Rica, and these were at that time still actual newspapers. They hadn't gone digital quite yet. And, I think something was lost in digital where you have this sense of anonymity, which really isn't real on the internet anyway. But you think it's real because, anybody can start a blog and call themselves a journalist. This kind of opened the floodgates to dirty journalism and opinionated journalism, and all of a sudden, all the newspapers are doing to keep up with all of these indies is tweeting about what so and so said on Twitter. Like, who cares? That's not news. And then that gave rise to, just finding news in places that there wasn't really news. And then we have fear-mongering, fake news, just forward I had the benefit of seeing old school versus new school journalism and seeing the digital wave really impact muckraking, like from the 30s, when anybody could say anything in a newspaper, true or not, nobody could sue anybody, and it was just all political. And so first of all, thank you to reel it back to where you were at. But on the other hand, I think I've got my work cut out for me. If I actually start doing these docs around the state, I don't think I'm going to get too many people willing to talk to me, because I actually get to the heart of the issue. And a lot of people that are on that dirty side or are connected to a shady side or know that part of the story that they'll never tell do not want that story told for obvious reasons. And so I think I might...
You don't want the truth told.
Well, yeah, I think I might have burned my bridges there.
And their story, their hero again, that's just what happens. And but then again, I think you're going to get the respect of a lot of people as long as you don't waylay people, and you didn't. I was watching for that. What I was saying, incidentally, that goes back to what I was saying about Carrie Lake. Was Jeremy Duda from the Capital Times? I think he's still over there. He was interviewing her, and she called him out. She said, "Look, enough of these little snarky remarks." Against every time you interview a conservative, you always have to have your little snarky remarks or your innuendos or your insinuations. Stop. And I think it really caught, because I happen to know them both, and I think it caught Jeremy up short. She definitely did something with him, but she was telling him, stop being a muckraker and stop doing this yellow kind of journalism. Even though that is what mainstream media is now, now it's out in the open. What I call the old media, old with an E,
right.
The old media, because they're completely controlled. It is all propaganda, and we haven't even watched a network in almost 8 years. I haven't watched a network newscast other than to flip through maybe once or twice during that time. For a minute, and then I say, this is just bogus. Again, click, let's go watch Netflix or something. It's a little,
where do you recommend? Thank you for saying that. There's a lot of people that advertise the problem. What's the solution? Where should people go to get news that's balanced?
That's a really tough question, because it does shift. There have been a couple of places that came out with great promise, and then you can see the shift, sort of like the Cato Institute. Good Lord, you can see where they went downhill away from that libertarian thinking that they still like to claim, but they're way off track at this point. But you see that also in all of the media, and the media does it because they're getting paychecks. Some of them are getting bonus checks for just adding inflammatory stuff or insinuative stuff in their podcast, in their broadcasts. I see it as the best place you can get it is from as many places as you can.
Right.
I would stay away from the networks and then go to a lot of the independents, and you'll get a feel for it, because they tend to have better information, and some of them are right there, like Luke. I don't know if you know Luke Rutkowski, a friend of ours. He goes all over the world, and when they're rioting in Paris, he's in the riot. He's there. He's
right.
videotaping. This is what happened. And then you see the media spin on it. You would not know they were talking about the same events. And that is tragic.
Yeah.
Because people gullibly believe what they see on TV. I think it's because they're so over-medicated these days.
Yeah.
Everybody's on a prescription.
Yeah. And they all have 8 million side effects that they have to get prescription for.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't it?
I'm 64, went in for a physical last year. The doctor said after everything, she asked me again how old I was, and I told her, and she goes, according to my charts, you're 35. No vaccines, no no drugs, no prescription drugs. Drugs are for recreational use only. But nothing. And when the PA handed me a sheet with all these lines on them, there must have been 30 lines there because I guess they needed them. She said, here, fill out all of your medications. And I looked at it, and I handed it back to her. She said, you didn't write anything. And I said, well, yeah. I filled it out.
Shocking.
And she said, and she was dumbstruck. It was like she'd never seen anybody who hadn't been vaccinated ever and who hadn't taken any drugs and who literally never gets sick.
Yeah.
I mean, food poisoning is about the only thing that I get.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. And on the notion of synthetic drugs, I am also the same way. I don't think I've taken anything harder than an aspirin to quell a heat-related migraine with lots and lots of water in more than 15 years.
Very good.
So yeah, I'm on par with that. I just don't agree with. I mean, if we needed it, it would be in nature, as far as I'm concerned. But that's a whole different discussion. I want to get back to this idea of independent journalism for a little while, because that seems to be really, really popular in the libertarian movement.
Definitely.
I've never claimed any party, but I definitely, when my right-leaning brother and mother say one thing and my left-leaning dad and cousins say another thing, I'm just like, well, I distill things down to what makes sense. And I think that even that rings true. With all of my libertarian friends, they always say if it doesn't fit your logic or your moral compass, it doesn't matter what side it comes from. There shouldn't be sides when it comes to making rational decisions. And
you don't have to align with a political party because
right.
The libertarian philosophy is what founded this nation. And the Libertarian Party had the audacity to name themselves after this pure form of politics. And the party does try to keep up. But, like any other political thing, you get people who come in and with bad intentions. I couldn't tell you how many provocateur kind of Republicans and Democrats have come in, signed up as a libertarian, and run for office. And, of course, when they lose, boom, they're right back in the Republican or Democrat Party. These are people who are of no significance other than to note that there are people who will take advantage of circumstances in order to forward their own personal life. I want to say money, their pocketbooks.
Yeah,
but
political agenda.
Power
yeah.
Too. People get a lot of excitement out of naming their title. I'm not real big on titles, but I know people who will tell me, if I ask them, they'll tell me, that they're a PhD, an MD, and a doctor of journalism, and this and that, and they go through, and I'm the local chapter head of the juniors, and I'm this, and I'm that, and they go on to this long diatribe. Whenever they do, I get a picture in my head. If you know what a court jester was,
yeah.
In the old days, when they would come out and they'd start their lines, and they would sing praises to the king or whoever, and it just went on and on and on about all the wonderful things he's done. That's what I hear, and so I really don't take those people very seriously. And as a Christian, I can say that the people who tell me that they're doing something because they're a Christian, my bullshit flag goes up because I know that's not true. They're just using it as a shield.
Or a flag.
Morality shows itself, and that's really what the libertarian philosophy is. And what's really interesting is when you saw the Tories become the Democrats and the Whigs become the Republicans, what they did was they each took part of our philosophy, or the philosophy founded this country, that virtually everybody in the convention room was a libertarian philosophically. Not all, but I think there were 3 that weren't. But the Democrats took the side that is compassion. Well, they took the side that is compassion and based on the individual, and the Republicans Republicans took the fiscal conservative part. So that's why we used to have libertarians who would say, well, we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. No, we're just libertarians.
Right.
We're not going to fit in somebody else's box, and we're not interested in fitting in somebody else's box. But that's really, you can be libertarian without being a member of the Libertarian Party. And believe me, there are a lot of them signed up as independents. Because, unfortunately, I think that the natural inclination... It's funny you say that, because I have a call-in. I sent a message over to Kelly Townsend because of her. I think she's doing a lot of stuff right on this election fraud stuff, because if we don't have, clear, clean elections, we got nothing.
Right.
And she's been good, but there is one point that I don't understand why she is backing, and I don't know if you know the differences between a ballot and a ballot image. Where literally all ballots are photocopied, that becomes an image, and it can be compared to the original ballot to see if anybody's monkeyed around with them, because you can digitally monkey with them.
Right.
And she is against that, and I don't understand that. Why? Why wouldn't you just put them side by side and say, okay, they match, next, no big deal? I don't understand why there are several Republicans who are also against even going through with the audit, which is, it's too late. It's over. I got the statistics and numbers yesterday from one of the people who is literally working it at the very top. And when the results come out, it's going to freak a lot of people out who thought we had safe, secure elections. But, so we see fraud on every level. Courtside, although that was a pretty hefty dollop of corruption,
right,
by a lot of people. But then again, you got the Clintons, and you got the Obamas, and you've got the Schumers and the Pelosi's, and those guys dwarf anything that's ever happened in courtside as far as corruption goes.
Well, I think that the efficacy, right, the grand scale of the impact is measurable in a greater metric. However, the root core of it remains, I think, principally the same, because it was such catastrophic. It had such a, if you know Mike, Jenny, they are traumatized by this decades later. Well, a decade later anyway, but it's clearly not going to go away. It's clearly not going to forgive their past. Other people can still use a couple of news reports against him. Jennifer was unable to successfully navigate politics after she moved, because, all you have to do is look her name up and she's been bashed by this side, that side, and the other side, even though all she did was pursue the same rights anybody else would and should pursue under the same circumstances. And that's really it. She said things people didn't like.
She had her newspaper and stuff up there, and they were getting all excited because she wanted to do articles on them, and they knew what she would inevitably wind up with, and that's why they were so totally against her.
Yeah.
She was a threat to them, just like Ed Foster. And he was one of the sweetest people you can imagine. He was just honest. Today we've got a problem. The books don't match. Let's take in the documentary when he was saying, "Who wants to talk about the money?" and not a peep.
Yeah.
And it's because it's Republicans, Democrats. These are individuals who are corrupt. They will join any political party that they think is going to get them elected or in a position of power. So, they're political whores is what they are. They have no political base, and they certainly don't have any philosophy.
Right. Well, they have a philosophy, but it's a very personalized, agenda-based one. Yeah.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But I am really looking forward to seeing what we can do, because I know if I had been governor at the time, I would have definitely interceded in courtside without a moment's hesitation. And whatever was available to me, whether it meant we bring the National Guard down there or not, it doesn't matter. The governor certainly can have some influence in a small town, but she didn't want to touch it. I think that was Jan Brewer at the time. I believe, Was it Jan Brewer?
I didn't get a mention of the governor at the time, but I know
think it was Jan Brewer.
Okay.
And she didn't want to get involved because that's not what Jan does. Jan was a go along to get along, and probably the least intelligent person I've ever met in politics.
Well,
who ever had any kind of standing.
I'm curious. So let's say something like this happens again. Barry Hess is the governor. What's the response, and what happens as a result of that response?
I think I'd immediately send in the state police to do an investigation and find out. And I would ask for the federal authorities to come in and help with the investigation part. In other words, to uncover things that are they're gonna hide, and see if we can't expose them. And then on behalf of the people, I think I would bring suit wherever was necessary, practical, that we could do, and literally, if it meant that we had to get rid of all of the police force, which we didn't because they fired them, and those guys stood up for themselves. Thank God, I appreciate that. But the bad cops stayed, and I would think if that's what it had to come to, I would do it.
Next question, and I'm kind of bouncing off of this because I think a lot of those things were attempted, and granted, the former governor did not do anything, as I understand it. The AG didn't do anything until it was actually ballasted across the mainstream media. Finally, after several years of being asked to intercede, it hits the mainstream media, and then people wake up. So let's put it into context. If this film does what I'm thinking, it's just a matter of time before it gets picked up. It's on the film festival circuit. I'm reaching out to people every day. It's just a matter of time before it really catches a big wind and gets distributed in a big way nationally, if not internationally. And so here's the thing. When I'll say not just mainstream, but like big streaming networks, billion-dollar companies, and everybody else gets this thing flying across their mastheads. These are still open crimes. No cop was ever decertified or even punished for a lot of these things I've got dozens of witnesses talking about it, right? No one was ever punished. What do you think would or should happen in the state of Arizona to either clean that up for future people's peace, but also the band of folks that were on that bad end?
Well, I'm not into rewarding evil at all or ignoring it. Mm-hmm. And the question here is, they remain a threat. In other words, are right now when we start. That is also a consideration, as because there's so many other things to take care of. But at the same time, I think that the corruption in politics is the root of all evil we see in our society. So that is a major, and I'd like to see the state bring suit against some of these people. Heck, we have a cop who murdered a guy in a hallway over in Tempe a couple of years ago. He's now on disability. They rehired him, and then they put him on disability. So he's making like $3,500 a month. He murdered a person on video, an unarmed man laying in a hallway. And he was never prosecuted because the police did, of course, an internal investigation and showed he followed protocol. Well, there's a moral line that has to be drawn. I don't care if you're following protocol.
Yeah.
Protocol wrong, obviously. There's a moral aspect to it, and this guy was just hopped up. He wanted to shoot somebody, and if I'm governor, if I can reopen that case, I'm telling you, it just sickened me. I cried, for crying out loud. It hurt me to watch that video.
Well, sounds like it's a good idea for my next documentary, perhaps.
You do look into it, because the guy who was there, he was staying in a motel, and he sold BB guns or something. Somebody saw one through a window, called the cops. They come up to the hallway and tell him to get out. Well, and he had no guns on him. None of them. When they came up to the door, they had him in the hallway.
Yeah.
And everything is visible. He's laying on the ground. The cop is saying, "Get up, lay down, get up, lay down." I mean, just inconsistent order. And then he shot him.
Yeah.
I hate even thinking.
Well, offline or perhaps through our personal contact, I'll get some more details about this from you, and I'll look into it.
Sure.
Yeah. So
I think it'd be a good story.
Yeah.
Just because, and you see the aftermath, what happened afterwards, all the internal we should have police investigations, or if we did, should simultaneous side investigations, because it's all about protect your brothers.
Right.
It just doesn't fly anymore.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know each other anymore, and
Yeah.
half steroids up, things are all jelly.
What I think I'd like to see, honestly, emerge from the revelation of the story of Quartzsite, even if it's just in one small community, like I'll consider that a success story, is the uprising, the mass wokeness, I guess I'll call it. That's kind of a Luke term. The mass of people that are finally waking up to say, this really isn't perhaps a just system. It hasn't affected me yet, but it's affected somebody I know. You can only do it for so long until it starts just affecting everyone. It's kind of like cancer, metaphorically and both kind of literally, in that it eventually makes its way around to everybody that you know. And so, I'll say that the Blue Line Brotherhood, I'm in big support of cops. I want to make sure that I'm balanced here when I say this, because I love good cops doing good work, because we need them. We need them. They're the only legal militia left in the world, I guess, in a lot of ways. But I think
some ways.
yeah. And that's another interesting discussion as well. But far be it for me to say that this story is unique. It happens everywhere. It just happened to happen in a tiny town where the entire life cycle of corruption kind of lived its life cycle and played out from the beginning, middle to end. And spoiler alert here, it ends exactly how you think it would end when a town takes off the gloves and goes straight for the throat for 30 years and involves themselves in fear-mongering and fake news and a social media, attack, sharking frenzy and all these things. It ends in tragedy. It destroyed the economy. It kept things at a standstill. They had a $25 million a year budget just from HERF that's supposed to fix their roads, and it took them 20 years to fix their roads. Like, nothing was being done. There was no schools. There's a clinic there now, and they've got a helicopter that brings people into major hospitals should the need arise. But for such a long time, they just destroyed themselves, and maybe a handful of people benefited from the financial aspect of that. And that is what corruption does, and that is what I think people are standing up and fighting for today. I'm happy to see that, and I'm also happy to see that they're working better. I'm not going to say everything's rainbows and unicorns in Quartzsite, but I will say that it does not exist in the way that it did. And that's the best starting point that these folks could ask for in a town that's historically always been that way. So I'm hoping that I can get that message across with this, and I want to thank you for being a part of that and being a part of my film, and certainly today being a part of the podcast. Thank you so much for being on the show, by the way.
Well, I think that you definitely were able to accomplish the goal in showing that what's there in this microcosm that everybody can see into just because of its size. I think Quartzsite is a very special example, and while it does happen all over, a picture fall down of Abraham Lincoln, no less. But I think that is something that will allow people to see it in other circumstances and other places, and that's exciting. You've done something here, whether you know how big it is or not. You have.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And Did you interview Ernie Hancock?
I did, yeah. He told me he made contact with a couple people. I think he said you might have been one of them. So apparently I owe you a thanks for vouching for me, because he was like, I wasn't going to interview you, but I called around on you.
Yeah, he and I talked the night before. But he is much closer to Luke than I am. They're both doing the same thing all the time. I just kind of duck in and out. I'll put the bug in his ear to see if we can get or some of the Corbin, some of the guys who are really known, fairly hardcore, and virtually all of them that I know have at least a libertarian philosophy. Now, some of them are liberal backgrounds, and I don't know many that have come from real conservative backgrounds, but they've gone liberal to libertarian, which is almost diametrically opposed, and I think that's fascinating, because I'm seeing it all over the place. People say, I'm so a Republican or a Democrat, and that's what I'm hoping on in this coming election, that people understand that a house divided cannot fall. I think Lincoln was wrong. That is, if we had at least three parties, more is better, at least three parties represented in a Congress or a legislature, you always have to, always have to try to indicate that third one, and it's going to be basically kingmakers, because it's going to be necessary. And I think we're going to see that time very soon. You're going to have a libertarian, and they're going to have all their focus back on what's good for the people and within the constraints of the Constitution.
Right. Well,
I think it's good. I look forward to it. I'm optimistic. I'm seeing this whole vaccine thing fall apart.
You're breaking up on me a little bit here.
Oh, I see the war falling apart. Vaccine thing, the pandemic it's fallen apart. We were misled as the public by the officials, and now we know the officials knew they were misleading us from the get-go.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a domino effect, one after another.
People like that. Yeah, but I would shed, and you should back, and Biden would say, even work them over, because we need something.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, we just need better people.
Don't get me wrong.
I think.
Yeah, better people.
Yeah.
But you see, the problem is when somebody comes in, say you're elected to, you go down there, D.C., and it can be an incredibly impressive, overwhelming place, and you suddenly feel like you are imbued with enormous power, and you're really not. You think you are, and then one of the old corrupt people is going to approach you, say, hey, I can get you on the inside track. Come with me, and we'll go to parties. They'll catch them doing things. They'll encourage them to do things that if picture of, and you can bet there are always pictures, of, they get them in a compromising situation, and they own them from the very start. And these are the new people who came in all full of experiment and reform, but why you see them back is because somebody got something on them, because press people, because they went to some of the leaders in Congress or the Senate. I went to one of their parties. I was invited there.
Yeah.
And I see how it happened. What we've got to do is the influence of the people who are there now.
Yeah.
All steeped in corruption.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a reality that I would share your earlier sentiment that I do look forward to. I don't know. I hate to use a cliche, draining the swamp, but it really is important that we just stop private interests and work for the people. And that, I think, is part of the beauty of the story in Quartzite. And did you actually listen to the interview with? I guess not, huh? With I just lost his name. Ernie, right? Have you heard that one yet?
Not.
It's on his web.
Nope,
it's on his website. I found it. Yeah.
Send me the link. I'd love to.
Yeah.
I go back decades.
Yeah, I'll do that. Cool. All right. Well, I
started out opposite sides, by the way. We got in each other's faces and told him how foolish he was, and he told me how foolish I was, and then we ultimately had dinner and came to the resolution. We both have the same objective, just on different tracks to get there.
Yeah.
And that's when everything mellowed out, and he became one of my best friends.
That's cool. Well, I'm a former travel show host, and we released close to 30 films from 43 countries, and in that time, I realized that no matter where you are in the world, the same objectives of everyone remain the same. Everybody wants a happy future for their kids, a safe community for their family, a prosperous future, a strong economic base. Everybody wants those things, but they all happen a very different way everywhere in the world. And I think that if people just kind of stepped out of their tiny little communities, whether it was a mental community or a physical one, a locality based one, I think if people just stepped out and saw how differently things work, and that our neighbors are not so strange and foreign, and that they're not to be feared and cajoled and ridiculed. I think that if we made it more personal and we just were humbled by the experience of how life happens in such a vast diversity of ways, we will very quickly realize that the dismantling of borders and political lines is so crucial if we're just going to achieve stuff, because we really do want the same things. Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't make any difference what line divides anybody. Everybody wants the same stuff. And so I think you found that out with Ernie. And
in a lot of circumstances where there are emergency situations, something happens. A spontaneous organization. You're out in the middle of where you see a car accident, you stop, know immediately what to do, and so does everybody else who's there, before the cops get there at all. It saved millions of lives over the years. It's because people don't really what color you are, what religion you are. You know, I've said it's never bloodlines. It's always going to be behavior. That's how I will treat you.
Right.
You know, it's a fair way to, but you get politicians in. Great, almost gone in America. That's the tragedy before Obama.
Hey Barry, can you do me a favor, Barry? Let me pause for a second. Can you make sure that the mic is plugged into your phone? You're really popping in and out on me real bad. It's hard to get all your words there.
Let's see, I'm double checking everything.
You sound a lot better already.
Okay. I picked it up and put it closer to me because I hate holding a phone by my head. But sorry about that.
All right, so you were saying?
What was I saying?
Well, I missed most of it. So I actually I lost quite a...
about well, let's see, with Ernie. No, I think actually we were at a lull in the conversation. I'll leave it to you. You're the interviewer.
Fair enough. I actually, I try to keep it under about an hour and a half, so I should probably wrap it up because I got an intro I got to put on here. But I'm perfectly happy to do another one with you. I like talking to you. This is our first one, and I'm already feeling like we're hitting a lot of great points. Not just about the film, but how it applies really to that bigger picture where America's at. So thanks so much for doing that with me. Let me know when we can do another one, and we'll set it up.
I'm pretty much at your leisure.
All right.
So let me know when you want to, and we'll get her done, and I'll try to have some ideas. I mean, courtside, that's fairly limited in terms of discussion, but that's what we're here to talk about. So,
yeah.
You know, it's hard for me to stay on track because I am aware of a bigger picture, and not to diminish courtside at all, because courtside is a beautiful example of what not to do in the city, and as a people in a town, what not to let your officials do.
Right. Yeah, truly. And they're out, and we got a new batch in, and I trust most of them. I think that a good many of them have the right objectives at heart. It's not my community, but what they do in their community kind of mirrors what happens in every community, and so it's still important to me. It still lives in its principal form everywhere in America. So it's important to pay attention to.
You know, I loved one phrase in the documentary where somebody said and they were from France or someplace. I think Ed Foster was saying that he got a letter from somebody in France saying if we don't have freedom in Quartzsite, Arizona, democracy in Quartzsite, Arizona, we don't have it anywhere in the world.
Right.
I thought that was a rather poignant little add-in that they had put in, and I thought that was very well done. I'm glad you added it.
Yeah, well, I try. My interviews, Barry, are full of wonderful quotes like that. I had a hard time. Like, I had to kill a lot of babies on this one and not put in so much that I wanted to put in. But yeah, that was one that I couldn't let go of. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was good. And Ed's such a good guy. God, I'm so sorry to see he's gone.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks so much again, Barry, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, and I hope I've given you something you can use.
Absolutely. You give me tons of stuff.
All right. Then next time.
All right. Cheers.